From Magick in the West End, Part 2 of the Magick Bookshop trilogy by Carla Trobe, Shahlia. I met Shahlia on a sparkling day in the city. Hermes was waving his wand to create a curtain between late winter and spring, always a tricky veil in London. Some brave souls wore t-shirts or skimpy dresses, while the cynics clung to their winter coats, freshly dry-cleaned or otherwise. All of us clutched our brollies close. As a commuter, whose journey often topped 4 hours a day, I was at raincoat stage, cold while waiting for the bus, yet unpleasantly hot on the tube. Despite our sartorial confusion, the citizens of London and our many visitors were generally enjoying a fresh infusion of serotonin into our collective mindset, courtesy of some real sunlight, lucid on our pallid skins, and enjoying the blooming of the trees in Hyde and St. James's Parks, and the strings of waddling ducklings that staggered in full fluff behind their finely plumed parents around the city ponds. Ah yes, a miniature pastoral idyll in the middle of the city, bringing a euphoric or even beatific smile to many a face. There was a bit of an attempt at European chic going on around the West End and Soho, as there always is in near-fine weather. Tables and chairs were placed hopefully on the pavements, and pioneers of summer sat sipping cappuccinos and long pale beers over their pastries of various nationalities. Through these happy denizens passed the drunks upon the steps of the Albion Theatre, slurping liquor so strong it's almost a solvent. Past the workers at the Chinese Medicine Centre with their chipped and sliced antidotes in jars the size of planets, through the Indian sellers of newspaper and chocolate and instant coffee, into the green and gold caduceus-blessed bubble that is Malinowski's Central, Shahlia walked. I had just finished reading tarot for an Indian lady whose sole interest was the marriage her 21-year-old daughter might make. The girl in question was in love with a boy of the wrong caste, and the matriarch favoured a much older man, a friend of the family. She asked me to divine the marital future of her daughter 5 years down the line. We promptly pulled the 8 of Swords. A woman stands blindfolded, her hands tied, legs unbound, but she chooses not to move for risk of falling over in the muddy puddles at her feet. A prisoner of war, a martyr to what she believes, wrongly or rightly, to be a higher cause. Her surrounds are bleak, and she suffers in silence. Oh, good! The fond mother's face lit up like Diwali as I showed her the image of her child, bound and compromised, swords hemming her in. So she shall conform to my will, then? Clearly, another resident so allied to her roots that she rejects the relative liberation in which her children are educated in the West, and wants only to send her daughter back to a village mentality. We often see this here, usually hidden beneath the burqa or purdah of religious rectitude. So following this dictatorial lady, a veritable queen of swords where her daughter was concerned, and knowing what I do as a long-term inhabitant of mixed communities, I was not particularly surprised when a very beautiful and very scared Kurdish girl sat down opposite me, and whilst glancing over her shoulder and out of the window like one with a sniper on their trail, whispered that she needed to go to a private room to explain her issues. Her name was Shahlia. We promptly adjourned to one of the basement consultation rooms we keep free for those who do not wish to spill their psychological and psychic beans by a West End windowpane. These are cosy little dens in the shop, much easier for me to focus in. Do you have a specific question or issue, or would you like a general reading? I inquired, as I usually do, once the door was shut. The general prediction goes about a year into the future and covers all major issues. The specific reading can answer any question you might have. You've paid for half an hour's consultation, so we'll probably have time for both. I'd like to do a general reading first to assess the lay of the land. Shahlia, who I guessed was in her mid-20s, but who had the typically fine skin of one much younger, alcohol and drug misuse have much to answer for regarding the facial aesthetics of the native Western community, sat quite still, assessing me and our environment. Then, gingerly, she rolled up the leg of her jeans and stuck her right calf out for me, I assumed, to examine. The leg was shapely, most of the skin on it as smooth as a leather-bound Koran. But running down its center, along the slender muscle, was a serrated scar of still livid pink, smooth and raised and shiny, with shreds of flesh standing out like stitched-up angry statements in its midst. My husband did this. She searched my face, as if expecting me to betray her confidence at any moment. I gave her my most empathetic and trustworthy expression. Whatever that might look like, I don't quite know. He used a carving knife. She flipped her long sleeves up. From wrist to elbow, she was so lacerated that the natural color of her skin was nowhere to be seen amidst the swirls and knots of serrated flesh. This was with a razor blade. He made it seem I had attempted the sin of self-elimination. I nearly died from blood loss, but got help just in time. Sadly, and feeling a little sick to be honest, I shuffled the cards while scrying her crown chakra. "And your question?" I asked, as gently as possible. We lived in Erbil, Kurdistan, in Iraq. My mother and aunt were pregnant at the same time. In 1978 we were both born, my cousin Ahmed and I. My father and uncle decided immediately that we should be married. Shahlia's eyes almost singed my aura with their intensity. They were dark as the Taj Mahal at midnight, but no lonely mausoleum she. Her lustrous eyelashes did little to conceal the lust for life which consumed her. She remained modest in gesture and stance, but her soul was burning up. That much was blatant. "Right," I encouraged as best I could. I disliked Ahmed throughout my childhood. He was always a bully. He always cheated in games and took my things. He played tricks to get me into trouble and treated me like his servant, and my parents always took his side against mine. When I was 13, my father died, and I hoped that the marriage arrangement might be forgotten. She sighed. But it turned out exactly otherwise. Instead, our family became even more determined that we should get married straight away. To keep the family strong and to honor my father's wish, she added. And then my real hell began. I handed the cards to her. "Shuffle these while you tell me about it." Her elegant hands did as I requested. So we got married, Viv, because for me, there was no alternative. I would have been thrown out of my home with no money or hope of prospects had I resisted, and Ahmed was overjoyed with the arrangement. She looked down and flipped out the death card, replacing it stoically. And why wouldn't he be? Under Sharia law, the branch of Islam we were raised within, a married man may have relations with as many women as he likes, but a wife is bound to this one man in all respects. I was like a sister to him, worthlessly familiar, but knowing he could have others too and that I was conditioned to cater to his every need, very happily he wedded and raped me. Shahlia gazed into her lap as she said this, then raised her fine eyes to meet my own pricked and misty ones. I struggled to remain professional. It was my practical help, not my sympathy, that this girl needed. He wanted sex every night, and when I refused, he forced me, knowing that nobody would care if I protested. One afternoon, I got home from shopping and found him having sex with our neighbor. She panicked, as women are stoned to death in our country for adultery. I told them both calmly that I did not mind, that I would say nothing, as I did not love him anyway. She shot me an intelligent look. I was not so obedient that I would pretend to that too. She finished shuffling the cards and eyed me questioningly. "Thanks. Now put the stack down and, using your left hand, divide them into 3 piles of any size," I instructed. As she did so, she continued to speak in excellent English, with only a hint of an accent. "When the neighbor was gone," she continued, her voice taut with emotion, "he took out the knife and went at my leg, saying that I would never escape him, and that nobody would ever want a marked woman." She patted the cards into a neat column. "But I did escape, Viv. After 7 years of sheer torture, my family ignoring my plight as is normal in our community, Ahmed threatened to downright kill me. I knew that he meant it. I had escaped once before, you see, and I went to my mother's. My mother slammed the door in my face and said that I was no longer her daughter, not for as long as I tried to get away from Ahmed and my responsibilities. That time, I was discovered sobbing in a nearby street by my other cousin, Ahmed's brother Muhammad, and then they did that to my arms. My husband threatened much worse even than an honor killing, if I ever did such a thing again. I began to place the cards on the emerald green silk cloth, representing Shahlia, the heartbroken and betrayed Three of Swords. Her obstacle was the emperor, staunch patriarch, wielder of material wealth and social status. Above her, as aspiration and possibility, the sweet free fool, turning over a wondrous new leaf in her karma. Her current foundation, however, was the dire Ten of Swords, lowest point on the wheel of fortune. Shahlia's immediate past, the shame-inducing, backbiting Five of Swords. Her immediate future, the fractional relief of the Six of the same suit. Then, 3 to 6 months into the future, the mostly mental anguish of the Nine of Swords. Her home, the shifting, illusory, and emotional, yet intuition-rich moon. Her hopes and fears, the progressive chariot, armored against foes. Shahlia's end result, the Ace of Cups. My bemused customer looked nervously at the predominantly bleak spread, with its bursts of yellowy sunshine. As my eyes alighted on the chariot, the sphinx-driven vehicle of the war god Ares, its silent steeds representing terror and anger held under control, I recalled an article I had read in the Evening Standard recently. Scotland Yard had just announced that it intended to re-examine its files of over 100 murders, nearly half of which had taken place in the London area, all of them of Asian women, and suspected to be honor killings performed by their own families when they refused to conform to arranged marriages and lateral religious and social obligations. Most of these had been excused and ignored, the article intimated, under the headings multiculturalism and political correctness. The physical and emotional abuse of our immigrant sisters and the genital mutilation of Islamic women had been treated with as much ignorance in Great Britain as it is in the pan-Islamic states. At home, these issues are ignored because of the religion, and here it's for fear of infringing human rights that nothing is done, she continued, reading my mind. It's like the 4 Afghan gunmen who held up a plane a few years ago. They were allowed to stay in Britain with their wives and children for humane reasons. But what of those abused by these madmen? Are their human rights taken into account? She gazed intently at me, clearly glad for the opportunity to get these subjects off her chest without being knifed for it. Did you hear of the case of Heshu Yonis, the 16-year-old stabbed to death by her father in West London? Asked Shahlia warily. She was from the same community as me. She was a sweet, kind girl, but she liked a Lebanese boy of whom her father did not approve, and so he slit her throat in her own home. My mind flipped back over its filing cabinet of notes, references and cross-references. Yes, I recall reading about it. Just too awful, I added lamely. I am scared, Viv. I escaped Kurdistan with my baby son when my husband threatened to kill me. The killing of unwanted wives is common in my culture, and my mother knew too that he would actually do it. So rather than turn me away again, this time she risked her own life by selling everything to give me money to get away from there. I went to Turkey, and from there I paid people smugglers to get me into Britain. I managed to claim political asylum here, and social services provided me with a flat. But now my cousin Muhammad has tracked me down and is in England. He has telephoned me many times, threatening to cut my tongue out and to stab me 100 times. I wondered how on earth he had managed to trace her, and then reflected that the Kurdish community here is small and no doubt highly alert. Even if Shahlia had changed her dress, which she clearly had, any culture has distinctive features, including facial ones. Shahlia, unlike many of her sisters, showed her face in public. She had probably been spotted by other Sharia adherents and reported back to the motherland. It was easy to imagine a mafioso of angry husbands networking all over the free world to return their errant property. Have you been to the police? I asked, figuring that there are times when physical and political help is of more immediate use than psychic first aid. Yes, I have, and they've been helpful, but they can't guard me 24 hours a day. Besides, it would make me crazy. I've taken out an injunction against Ahmed and Muhammad, as I fear they will not be far behind one another. They call me our filthy house dog. I noticed that she was unconsciously cradling her lacerated arms as she spoke. So I beg you to help me, please, if you can. I just need the universe, the spirits, and God himself to tell me whether or not I will be safe from my family. Is England to be my salvation? Will my son and I be happy here? All I want is to be at peace, to work for a living when my permit comes through, and for Abu to have a good education and grow up happy and free. For a moment, I regretted my occasional rancors over the topic of immigration. I can get quite hot under the collar about people flooding into England to claim government benefits and free healthcare, and we certainly have a problem with that. But the scavengers take the attention away from the genuine causes of those seeking fair, skilled work or political asylum. I am truly glad to have been born in a country where those in fear for their lives can receive protection, where the persecuted can find sanctuary, regardless of their country of origin, religion, and political perspective. We should fly St. George's flag and the Union Jack in honour of this faculty, not just for the football. I thought with a sudden outburst of patriotism, I am grateful for my liberty, truly. It should, of course, be the right of every living being. I read Shahlia's tarot, the Three of Swords in the present indicating grief, heartbreak, and painful separation, crossed by the Emperor, the system itself as obstacle, patriarchy and tradition, religious dogma, family ties, the empire of one's nativity. Above her, as aspiration, the Fool, a new beginning, Shahlia chasing her dreams, her own limitless possibilities. Beneath her, as her foundation or enduring state of affairs, was the drastic-looking Ten of Swords. A man lies prostrate, his face in the earth, 10 deadly swords sticking into his spine. He is pinned down, backstabbed, hopeless. The dawn is beginning to break, blood-stained but golden on the horizon, but his face is stuck in blood and mud, and he cannot perceive the new day. He believes his life is over and that he's as dead as the dodo, though he still breathes. It is true that for Shahlia, resolution will not be immediate, and the new day will take months to manifest. Your life at the moment is at the bottom of the wheel of fortune, I declare. There's a great deal working against you, but the very worst is done now. There's nowhere to go but up from there. Shahlia nodded wearily. Behind, as the immediate past, the Five of Swords, trouble, conflict, other people's low-level emotions interfering with one's equilibrium. That soul-smiting harridan, spiteful gossip. I sketched a verbal image of betrayal to her, and, hating having to say this, warned her not to trust even those of her recent acquaintance. I met a lovely girl from home in Finsbury Park, she reflected nervously. She speaks in English and claims to be liberated, but she lives with her Kurdish parents, who are traditional. I instantly perceived that this girl was the grapevine through which Shahlia's location had been passed back to the fatherland. She is speaking behind your back, I said urgently. Shahlia, have nothing more to do with this woman. Are you able to move again? Social services have me on a list. They will take me to protected housing when a place comes up. Good. Go. Ahead of her, the Six of Swords. A man rows his family across a river of tears. They are in transit, but so unsure of their destination that even the front of the boat goes off the edge of the picture. The important thing for you now, though you have no clear goal in sight, is to keep striving, to keep putting energy into your journey, I summarize. It will be an effort, but with diligence you will be able to steer your course, and that of your son, and stamina will see you through to dry land, a place to rest a while. Perhaps to fully re-establish yourself. But time will tell. Then, 3 to 6 months into the future, the Nine of Swords. More stress, more fears, real and phantasmagorical, sleepless nights and the crisis still ongoing. Poor Shahlia. It was exhausting just watching her spread work itself out. Her home was represented by the shifting lights of the moon. Your environment, both literal and emotional, is under the influence of hidden forces and the liminal world of the imagination, I tell her. You're in flux and need to go with the flow, whilst being as discriminating as possible regarding other people. Shahlia stared at the card, particularly at the two quadrupeds howling up at the nocturnal luminary. These dogs. Actually, one's a dog and one's a wolf, and the point is that by moonlight, it's impossible to discriminate between the two. It's like the French expression for twilight, entre chien et loup, between dog and wolf when you can't see properly and can't tell which will lead you home and which will turn around and devour you en route. Shahlia shuddered and gripped her mangled forearms. Is one my husband, the domestic dog, and the other, the wolf, Muhammad? I was impressed by her ability to assimilate and relate to the symbolism. Such is the art of divination. They could certainly be in this reading. In general, it simply means emotional confusion. Don't worry, Shahlia. If you go with the flow, feeling your way ahead whilst employing your common sense and intuition too, you should be able to dodge the danger. She gave me a faint smile over liquid eyes. I moved swiftly through her hopes and fears. She barely needed to be told about these. You must continue to harness the dark side of your psyche in order to create momentum. You see the driver here? I pointed a purple varnished nail at the man riding the chariot. He's Ares, the Greek god of war. His steeds, the black and white sphinxes, represent terror and anger. As you can see, Ares is using them to pull himself forward. Yes, I need to do that, she murmured. I could tell she was on the verge of tears of strain, of relief, and gnosis. Just as the books in the Malinowski shops are bought and worked upon by the mage in order to meet exactly the right reader, the psychics here are handpicked by the owner as cosmic messengers intended to meet exactly the right clients on his premises and deliver the information they require. Note that he's protected by both armor and the chariot itself, I encouraged. The anger itself has become the vehicle, the self-protection. But will I be happy? Will Abu be happy? I do not want to spend the rest of my life fighting. Indeed. Well, I'm glad to tell you that your end result is the Ace of Cups. I held the card aloft for emphasis. Your cup overfloweth. Pardon me? I had forgotten, in my enthusiasm for the reading and for Shahlia's wonderful comprehension, that she was in fact a new arrival in England, and not acquainted with biblical or medieval English. It means that you will be very happy. It's the most feminine of the cards, the most receptive and creative. It means rejuvenation, effervescence, and certainly happiness. She smiled at me sublimely. I felt that I did not deserve the full force of her gratitude, such as she was emanating me across the table, for all I had done was to interpret the cards as she shuffled them, and as they fell in the spread. I was simply lucky to be in the right place at the right time for a positive reading. I have finished other readings with star-crossed clients in other types of tiers, and that's not my fault either. All that can be reasonably expected from we cosmic messengers is to be as articulate as possible, and as positive, even when the chips are dramatically down. Shahlia's chips in the long run were thankfully visibly up on all levels. We both looked at the clock. One of those unpleasantly necessary tasks of the professional tarot reader, though I've learned to make my references to the tick-tock of Chronos incredibly subtle. Shahlia, polite and deferential as she was, had done what so many customers don't, kept track of my time rather than simply becoming consumed by her own experiences and needs. I was again impressed. We've gone slightly over time, she said. I'm sorry, you must be very busy, Viv. I don't want to hold you up, and I need to get back to Abu. But you have helped me very much. Thank you. She held a hand out over the spread for me to shake. 2 minutes later, Shahlia was gone, her touch still tingling on my fingers. Her grip was firm, solid flesh, I thought. She'll endure. I never saw or heard of her again. Hermes cast his cloak of invisibility about her, I suspect. Like England herself, he can be a very accommodating host when he wishes to be.